equal rights, which of course is productive and still necessary, and there still needs to be people advocating for that. But at the same time, the language of equality, to me, is problematic in that it implies that what men have is sort of like the ideal of what we want to have, and so in order to be equal, we need to rise up to the point where men are. So in that sense, I don't want to be a part of feminism if it's defined with the language of equality that implies that sort of structure.
Why transgender is such a sticking point in our community is a good question.
It's weird.
And I think it has to do partly with the whole question of feminism and male privilege and what is the relationship between gender privilege and transgender identity.
The way you perceive your body is determined by the culture that you live in. And this is a culture that devalues women's bodies at every turn.
That doesn't mean transition is an attempt to escape a culture that hates my female body.
How can you be so sure?
Because I don't hate your body. I don't hate my female friends, my mother, aunts, or even strangers. It's you that hates women's bodies, you that sees them as less than. That's the one thing you could never understand. I don't feel the same way you do about women. I don't carry that shame that...
I guess I just haven't really moved past the self-hatred. I hate saying that. I hate myself for saying that. Self-hatred part of being trans. I mean, if I could wake up tomorrow and make it go away, I would. And I don't know if I would have said that a few months ago, but I feel that way now, so I imagine that will probably change, but it just complicates everything.
I'm pretty sure that it's going to change the way I think of you. Like, the way that women perceive you. Yeah, I mean, I think before I considered you more trans, and there were times where I was like, I'm fucking a woman, I'm a woman. I mean, they were few and far between, but they occurred. Or I could at least imagine you as a woman, it's like...
Sorry to keep you waiting, but I've been running late all day.
It's fine. I wasn't waiting that long.
This is a slightly awkward situation, but I'm afraid I can't prescribe you testosterone.
Was something wrong with my test results?
No, nothing like that. But when you came to see me last week, I was not informed, or rather I was misinformed about your age. You're not 18 yet. I can't prescribe you hormones.
Misinformed? I filled out my paperwork. I didn't lie about my age.
I'm really sorry to put you through this. I don't know how it happened, but there's nothing I can do.
Well, you could just give me the hormones anyway.
Look, I know there are ways you can get your hands on hormones, and there's nothing I can do about it except ask you to be safe. Consider waiting.
I have been waiting, and I came here to be safe, but you're not helping me. Take it.
Without your parents' permission, or in your case, the state, the best that I can do is prescribe hormone blockers. They will keep your body from any further feminization until you turn 18, at which point I could prescribe you testosterone.
No adolescent has a frame of reference for what happens to them biologically, emotionally, hormonally, physiologically, mentally. You layer that with being queer. You layer that with being trans. You layer that with being black. Layer that with being homeless or poor. Wow. So we are really challenged, as a community to say, how do we role model something that even we don't have a frame of reference for, to then try to identify with somebody who by, age 18, 19 has been out for half their life.
Right. I think it's an adult decision. And in that sense, not by adult, I don't mean you have to be 35. it troubles me if someone 18 or less would want to say, go through the process.
Had I grown up later as a athlete and as a butchish teenager, probably not very butch now, but I was pretty butch as a teenager, and playing sports and playing it with all boys teams. I even played in college on the boys soccer team until I started a girls team. I might have felt a little bit of peer pressure to decide something that wasn't true.
Well, it's sort of like the argument, right? Like, you don't want to hand out condoms because then that would be admitting that people are having sex, you know, underage. And the reality is, kids are having sex. I mean, like, under 18, people are having sex. It's just happening. So, yeah, maybe it's better that they have access to condoms. And so if people have access to testosterone anyways, or to hormones, then...
You should have someone to talk to about it.
Yeah.
Or somebody that maybe was older that did transition and can talk to you about what their experience was.
It's obviously an important question, but I feel it's like we're not even like ready to ask ourselves that. I mean, like, we can't even deal with like granting adults the right to have hormones and surgery. So like, how are we gonna deal with like granting kids that right?
Part of me feels that part of getting ready culturally and getting those systems in place is giving actual agency to youth, to make those decisions, first of all. But you're right, it's like the chicken has to come before the egg, or whatever, or the egg comes before the chicken. Either way, we're still in the same predicament. Yeah. I mean, how are we going to head towards that future without actually actively heading towards it, without really entrusting our youth to make that kind of decision?
When I first started doing trans work, probably in 1999, I was part of a committee that was trying to create new standards of care for folks that were under 18 to transition. And ultimately, everybody in the committee wanted hormones to be accessible for folks under 18. And wanted to create guidelines to do that, but legally, how was that going to work? And medically, what was that going to look like? It was really complicated. I have seen plenty of folks transition starting at the age of like 12, 13, 14. And folks I've known that have started that young, I haven't seen anybody unhappy with the effects.
We're working within a system that says that folks under 18 have to jump through certain hoops that folks who are 18 in a day no longer have to jump through. And we know that nothing happens when folks turn 18, and that I hope that we're moving towards a place where we're beginning to work through those cultural fears about trans identities and about young people having the right to determine what happens to their bodies. We're by no means even close to there, but my hope is we're moving in that direction.
It's not your fault. I mean, I wrote down my age. I told them. I just don't understand how she didn't know. I mean, it makes no sense. Like, the whole thing just makes no sense. They know we can get hormones on the street, and they talk about us wanting to be safe, but what are they really doing about it?
Look, I can't tell you I know what it's like. And I can't even tell you what to do, but I do care about you. Just give me some time, I'll think of something.
I feel like it's not really captured how three-dimensional like our lives are, and it's not like, oh, tranny goes this, tranny goes to market, tranny and you're just like, $1.99 a pound, tranny's mad, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like everything is all about your trans experience.
told my best friend that I was coming out as trans, she told me she was politically opposed to my identity. And we haven't spoken since.
I worked at this gay and lesbian magazine, and I'm in my 40s, and there were people there in their 20s, and just talking to them, there's so much difference in their attitudes than mine. And, you know, being gay and whether it's a big deal or not and everything. And I think as the generations pass by and as things change, there'll be much more rapid change. And the decision of what gender to be will not necessarily be of such magnitude.
For me, at least, the lesbian or queer experience is feminism and is equality and is kind of nurturing those who aren't getting nurtured elsewhere.
Right. Ideally.
So then it seems like for you, the all-inclusive is where you're coming from and where probably a lot of young people are coming from. They just figure, well, that's what it should be. Everyone should be included.
Yeah, why do you think there's that generational? Because I do think some of that is generational.
For me, part of it is about, you know, when I was an undergrad, what I studied was women's studies. What I studied was the differences between men and women, which is a totally different thing than reading about, you know, about it's a totally different thing than queer theory and talking about trying to break down barriers, trying to break down identity categories. So, you know, to a certain extent, it's you know, generational is about, it's about knowledge.
My experience around the generational shift, I think, has to do with older generational lesbian feminists having a hard time letting go and feeling unappreciated, and then being really transphobic. But all of that mixes together with what came to me as feeling like a generational loss, that they had passed me the baton and then I, you know, fucked it up.
I don't know what it means to be 20 years old and a lesbian. You know what I'm saying? I'm over 60, so it's a very different kind of thing.
They are not lesbian defined as we were lesbian defined in the 60s. We needed to create a lesbian newspaper in the 60s and early 70s. We need to create a mountain moving coffee house.
The impetus that gave us those things, we're not going to do that now. I think we have to look to the young people and see what kind of communities they build.
She was like long lost family. We talked story all night, ate salty snacks and cuddled like cool water on soft skin, like grooves on the smooth, soulful dance floor, like home. Rice and soy sauce, milk and cookies, we were in like Flynn, we were connection, rising above all the accommodating lotus blossom bullshit. We were organizing, we were marching, we were telling it, we were living it. Until she kicked me out with no warning. Said I didn't belong anymore, wasn't welcome, changed the keys. So I wandered looking, found a new home with a different vibe. He was tough, he was cool, he took me for what I was, didn't trip, let me be me, didn't make me change my name, understood, and I was digging it. Though the food wasn't as good and the music non-existent, I embraced him and he me. We told our stories, shared our struggles, helped each other survive, stayed alive, talked transition, transgression, expression, depression. Then one day he said it wasn't real, I wasn't real, didn't belong, wasn't on the same journey as he was, tried to change the keys. And I skidded. Right out of school, off my community, slipped on my membership, packed my belonging, and betrayal fell off the vibe and the rules. Knocked down, took my time, laid low, shook my head. Then shook it off, got back up, instead of homeless, made my home, my many homes, my many communities, my own set of keys.
Did I say how you wanted it?
Mm-hmm. That was good.
studs I knew were studs. You weren't gonna flip and call them girls.
And the challenge,
That
might
was
be too.
language. That was a culture. I mean, even right now, there are places I go where, you know, I'm a dude. I'm brother.
Yeah.
I mean, that ain't gone. There's still contexts in which, you know, that's how we live. That's how we identify. So that's not gone. It's not as prevalent because there was certainly a class basis for that stuff too, if we want to look at it for what it were.
The truth is, you know, I was a part of a nationwide sort of group of some of the only lesbian identified nonprofits in the United States, and the truth is there's not one left besides Michigan that isn't now trans-inclusive. Every single lesbian-based organization has now switched and realized that gender was always a part of the conversation, realized language matters and doing it right. So the good news is that the train moves whether or not people get it.
I guess I would be like the most feminist non-feminist you could possibly be, or something like that. Maybe that's a cop-out, but...
People that don't know you that are watching this are going to assume that you're F to M.
Yeah.
And so...
That's true.
You're sort of playing that. I mean, that's sort of, like, anyways, people are going, because it's really about transmasculinity.
Yeah, right.
But I don't know. I kind of find that really interesting.
Yeah.
I just wanted to put that out there. I figured you knew that already, but I just wanted to say. Like,
I didn't know.
Okay.
I mean, I did, but I didn't. Does that make sense? I was like, oh, I wonder if that's something we're gonna approach that subject, or if we're just gonna be like, this is Gabriel, this is Gabriel's experience, go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, we're never gonna really talk about how I identify,
Right.
you know? Which would be fun.
It's a whole separate thing. It's not like, I didn't become a man. I don't want to become a man. I have no plan of ever becoming a man. Like, that word just, you know, makes me want to throw up. I mean, I can't. It's like, because we're not, you know, I'm not that. It's not like, well, I took hormones, I had surgery, and now I'm this. Like, I don't want to be that. Nothing I do, even if I have every surgery out there, like, I don't want to be a man.
1, 2, 3, 4.